It all began when my wife wanted a divorce. 3 years into our marriage, she sat me down one evening and told me she wasn't happy. "I just need space to figure things out," she said, her voice filled with forced sincerity. "This isn't about you, it's about me." Classic line, right? I didn't argue or beg her to stay. I simply nodded, letting her believe I was too stunned to respond. That's the thing about me. I don't show my cards until the game is over. In the weeks that followed, she threw herself into self-discovery. Late nights with friends, weekend yoga retreats, and countless hours scrolling on her phone. I'd catch her smiling at notifications, quickly tilting the screen away whenever I walked by. But I didn't push. I just observed. I noticed how little time she had for me. No more dinners together. No more lingering conversations about the future. She had one foot out the door, practically daring me to react. But I didn't. Instead, I started making plans of my own. A month later, she came crawling back. "I made a mistake," she whispered one night, tears streaming down her face. "I love you. I don't want to lose us." She didn't explain what had changed, and I didn't ask. I just put on my best understanding husband face and told her we could work through it. She hugged me tightly, thanking me for being so forgiving. But forgiving? Hardly. That was the moment I decided to ruin her. The night she begged to come back, I held her close and reassured her everything would be fine. I kissed her forehead, let her cry on my chest, and promised we'd rebuild what was broken. But while she thought I was comforting her, I was secretly tearing everything apart. Step 1. Securing my finances. Every month, I quietly moved money from our shared account into one she didn't know existed. By the time she returned, I had a healthy safety net sitting untouched. When I told her I'd handle the bills to ease her stress, she looked so grateful. If only she knew. Next, I turned my attention to my health. While she was out finding herself, I was in the gym 5 days a week. Each rep, each sprint on the treadmill, felt like a step closer to my freedom. I wasn't just working on my body, I was sharpening my mind. I took up hobbies I had abandoned long ago, painting, running, even cooking. I wanted the version of me, who walked away from this marriage, to be one she'd regret losing for the rest of her life. But the real groundwork started with the lease. The apartment was in my name. Thankfully, she didn't have the credit score to co-sign when we first moved in. I reached out to the landlord under the guise of exploring my options. After a few emails and some small talk during a visit to the office, I had a plan in place. I negotiated an early termination with a move-out date set for mid-December. Imagine her surprise when she returned from her parents' vacation to find me gone. Her things were in the trash, new locks were on the door, and she had nowhere to live. As for her car, well, it was never really hers to begin with. She loved to brag about her SUV, but it was my name on the title, my credit, that got her the loan. I contacted the dealership and started exploring my options. After some research, I found a buyer in another state who'd happily take the car off my hands once the paperwork cleared. By the time her trip ended, that car would be on a tow truck, heading halfway across the country. She'd be left with no wheels, no home, and no explanation. All this time, I played my role as the doting husband to perfection. I listened to her stories about work and plans for the holidays, plans I knew I'd never follow through on. She had no idea the man she was falling back on was meticulously plotting her ruin. The wild card? Her mom. I had always thought her mother was opportunistic and flirtatious. I'd noticed her habit of liking photos of shirtless younger men on Instagram long before this mess began. She even joked about how she still had it. So, I created Ryan, a 29-year-old personal trainer with abs that could grate cheese. A few strategically placed photos, a bio full of confidence, and within days, I had her mom hooked. It didn't take long for her to bite. A few compliments from Ryan about how youthful and beautiful she looked, and she was hooked. Soon, the messages turned flirty. I saved every screenshot. It wasn't really about her mom, though. The man who once looked me in the eye and said, "The women in this family are too loyal for nonsense like cheating," would soon be eating his words piece by piece. Everything was falling into place. She thought she was rebuilding our marriage, but I was building her reckoning. By December, everything was set. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. She had planned to spend a week visiting her parents for the holidays. It was the final piece I needed to pull the trigger on everything I had been working toward. The first step was the apartment. The day after she left, I met with the landlord. By that evening, the locks were changed, and I handed over the keys. I had already moved anything I cared about into a storage unit weeks prior. Her clothes, makeup, and endless piles of shoes were left neatly in garbage bags and dropped off at a donation center. But I didn't stop there. The car was next. I made arrangements for it to be towed while she was still on her way to her parents. The process was almost laughably simple, just a signature and a confirmation call, and the car was en route to its new owner across state lines. By the time she returned, she'd find nothing but an empty parking spot. The piece de resistance, however, was what I left behind for her parents. Her father had always been vocal about his high opinion of their family's values. Women in their family were supposedly loyal to a fault, incapable of the kind of betrayal I had experienced. That little delusion was about to shatter. On the day she arrived at her parents' house, I scheduled an email to her father. Attached were screenshots of every message her mother had exchanged with Ryan, every flirty reply, every desperate attempt to feel young and desired again. I made sure to include a note from Ryan, apologizing for cutting things off, but explaining that he just couldn't be with a married woman anymore. It wasn't just about exposing her mom's infidelity. It was the irony of it all. Her father had defended his daughter's character to me once, insisting she wasn't capable of cheating. Now he'd see that not only was his daughter disloyal, but so was his wife. I didn't stick around to see the fallout. By the time her vacation was over, I was long gone. The apartment was empty, the car was sold, and I had blocked her on every form of communication. She called me repeatedly from her parents' house, panicking when she couldn't reach me, but I ignored every call. Later, she tried everything, calls, emails, showing up at my work, but I had severed every connection. All that remained was the wreckage she'd have to sift through alone. When she returned to the city, she found nothing waiting for her, no home, no car, no husband. Just an empty life and a hard lesson in consequences. Months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she tried to explain herself to everyone we knew. She told them I'd overreacted and left her in a moment of temporary weakness. Funny though, she didn't mention that this weakness involved another man or her plans to leave me. Her reputation was in tatters. Her father, humiliated by the revelations about his wife, had stopped speaking to her altogether. Her parents' marriage was reportedly on the rocks, and she had to move in with a friend because she couldn't afford her own place. As for me, I was thriving. The money I'd saved gave me a fresh start. I moved to a new apartment, focused on my career, and even started dating again. Revenge wasn't just sweet, it was calculated, precise, and deeply satisfying. Some say it's petty to hold a grudge. I disagree. Some betrayals deserve a response, one that cuts as deeply as the initial wound. Revenge, after all, must be carefully planned and served cold.